I've got 3 cards to get through, and it's showing you just how really you can basically use this plate. So I'll get it out of the packaging. This one and the other design comes with 2 dies, and they look slightly different to the normal dies that we're used to Lisa bringing out to us. We have the outside frame, which is really useful actually, because it allows us to give that perfect matte and layer in the background here. But the actual die itself, the one that actually does all the work for us, is a very solid plate. I'll show you a few different techniques, and it's basically we use it as a plate to layer our inks onto. Now there is another design that I've made, another card that I've made, where we can actually use it plain as it is, and it gives an embossed feel. Because I don't know if I can bring this card in here. The white areas, which is the areas obviously that the ink doesn't go on, but they are slightly raised, so it does actually give quite a tactile texture to the surface of these designs. So when you don't use any ink at all, it really does give like an embossing folder effect. Not as 3D obviously as the folders, but it's not designed to be that way, but it does give a super effect there. Now I've used these dies with distress ink, so everything that I'm doing today works just as well as with distress inks, but I should be using Lisa's inks as well, because I think it's nice for those of you that have these to start seeing all the different uses with them, and actually hopefully give you some confidence to actually use these as your blending inks. Now, as you can see, because I've got the black casing, I'm using all blending inks today, because we know that they blend into each other perfectly well, and with all of Lisa's brushes. Now for this first demo, I'll actually be using the little bijou brushes. These have got a really flat surface to them, so they give a really lovely blend, but also put a lot of ink onto whatever surface you're working onto. And I found that this was a really lovely way to apply the ink. I think I'll start off with a lighter in the middle, and what I'm going to be doing is applying ink sort of in a circular motion really, and this would be lovely if you're doing perhaps a rainbow card. So I'm just picking up the ink as we do. I mean, these inks are so juicy, as you can see. And just lightly, and just making sure that my brush goes straight down onto the die there, I'm just going to swirl the ink initially with this lighter colour in the centre, and just go round. So I'm going to come in with the second colour, and I'm just going to go around the outside. And what you can see I'm doing is just creating like a halo effect. You don't have to put it on this way, you can put it on in stripes, and I will be doing that a bit later on. You can put it on in patches, and it all depends also on the amount of colours that you're using, but I think this just gives quite a nice effect. And because I'm using all shades of blue, I'm going in with the same brush, so we don't need to worry too much about swapping brushes at this stage. Obviously if you were using different colours, then I would perhaps say just use a different colour for each of the brushes. So now you can see that the ink is settled on there. You have quite a lot of workable time, blending time with these inks actually, so there's no need to sort of really rush getting the ink on there and then get it into your die cutting machine. A small section of my card down to size. Now what I will suggest you do, because we don't want this design to smudge, make sure that when the die goes down that it doesn't move. Now you can just use a little bit of tape just to attach this to the card, just to make sure that it doesn't move. I've got used to using this actually, so I can just make sure I hold that. Now I'm going to be bring the die cutting machine into the side, so again you can actually see this working in real time. Now these dies do actually have an edge to them as well, so you don't need to put you don't need to run it through with this part of the die also. That is just for the matte and layer. Don't worry about the crack that goes there. So as we can see, the outside edge comes away. And we have that lovely design, and you can see the swirl effect in the background. Now you can see the one that I've done here, I would have perhaps put slightly less ink on, so this has come out a little paler. Obviously how much you load the dye is the amount that so is usually a good indication as to what goes onto the cardstock there. And you can see actually now what I'm talking about, although all of the dye was covered in ink, the main design still pops in white, so it's really foolproof. To be honest, you don't need to worry about making sure that certain areas of the dye are left ink free, because you will get a perfect impression each time. Now to create the word in the middle there, I've used Lisa's large stitched alphabet dies because I think they work really well with this. This time around I shall be putting love on there. What I suggest you do actually is to make sure when you line these words up, to actually make sure that they stay in the position that you want to, is actually attach the dies with a piece of washi tape, and then allows you to move them wherever you want to on the card. If you want them to go this way, obviously you put the dies sort of closer together. But I think what I'll do, I'm going to do it slightly different this time. This one is in the centre, but I shall just lay this down a little bit further down the card, I think. Now, another little tip that I found when I'd done this one actually, you want to, when you anchor the dies to the background here, you just want to make sure that the tape that you're using isn't too tacky, because it may well take off the surface of the card when you run it through. So what you can do is just make sure that you either take the tack off onto a piece of your clothing. So basically you're picking up a bit of lint and just making the washi tape less tacky, so we can avoid as much as we can taking off that surface. If you have a low tack tape, then I would say that is the perfect solution to that, but say as long as you're careful, I think you'll be fine. So we just line that up on there. We can run this through our die machine again. Right, now we just be really careful when we take this off. And the other way actually to prevent the ripping is to really make sure that you don't pull the washi tape straight upwards. Really do run it sort of back on itself, and I think that's another way that you can actually try and prevent as much, as little tearing as you can. So we have that die cut from there. My little pokey tool. We're obviously not going to use these die cuts, but what it does do, the more cards that you make like this, we end up with a good selection of letters that we can keep in the envelope to use at a later time. So I think that's a really lovely thing to do as well. Now I've die cut myself a piece of contrasting card with the matte and layer die that comes in the set. So that takes the guesswork out. And then once we layer that on there, remember to, if you're using a letter which has got an insert in it, to put that back in. And there we have your words. Now, if you want to sort of embellish the sentiment there, I've gone on to die cut using Lisa's Tatty words. But obviously play around with whatever sentiments that you have in your stash. But using the same colour as the background, I have the Tatty words that I can use to finish off that sentiment. And I think what I'll do, I'll just snip into this and take off that love so we don't repeat that word. Now what I would do, and I won't do it now, but I'll do it a bit later on, I would actually mount this and on 3D foam, so when you actually put this onto the card, lay onto the card, you've actually got a bit of dimension, and that sort of comes away from the card, but you can see the effect there. So that's one really lovely effect, and that background I think is just so pretty. The second card I had was this one here. Again, a really simple card. You're just using the beauty of the background. But again, it just allows you that chance to have a play with the colours and the inks that you have, and just utilise other dyes that you may have in your stash from Lisa. Now what I've done here, I've actually created the background and I've used the EDGECUTZ dyes just to separate this and just give this a bit of interest in the background, and then just used a banner and some sentiments just to finish that off. Again, another really simple card, and these would be really super to batch make. Now I'll just show you how I've done this, because I applied the ink in a slightly different way. I'm going to clean this off. Now actually it's interesting, what I'm doing here, I'm just spritzing to clean off the dye. But what you can do, just to save wasting that ink, and I thought, I've used a piece of watercolour card, and at this stage, before I wiped it, I spritzed it with water and I just run it through the same way as I did before, using watercolour card. And this is the effect that you had this time around, which is completely different. But this would be something that you can just use and keep in your little stash of sort of background oddment bits of card that you may have, and it may be something that you can use on another project to collage with, or stamp on top of, or even die cut for something else. I think it just gives another really interesting texture, and that's onto watercolor card, because I've used so much water on there. The super smooth wouldn't actually work, but I won't do for you that time. And you can see actually just with a spritz of water how easy it is just to clean the dyes, and it shows you also how well, it's easy to clean Lisa's inks using the water. Now this time around I'm actually going to be using the ink directly from the pad onto the dye. Again, this is another really quick way, and this will definitely give you a far more intense colour. So we can see there that goes on nicely. So it's like inking up a stamp. Let me just turn that around. Now if you're using similar sort of colours, then you can just gently sort of blend the two colours into each other without contaminating the ink pad too much. So I think what I'll do also this time around, I'll bring in a purple, so we've got like 4 colours on there, and you can see just how much coverage that ink gives onto that dye. And just swipe into its neighbouring colour just a little bit, just to soften the harsh line. So we come in with another blue. So you can see, oh, let me just add a bit more to the edge there. Go right to the edge of the die. Now already you can see that this will give a much more intense background. So again, put this onto your cardstock, tape it down if you find that's an easier way to use it, because what we really don't want to do, and hopefully you can see now that if this smudges, then it will actually smudge your design a little bit, which if you're using it as a background and perhaps not as a feature, then that wouldn't be too much of an issue. But you can see I use my envelopes for all sorts of things. Now what you can do with these dies, you can make your choice. You can you can either use the cloud die and separate it up that way. I quite liked using these ones, and I think what I might do is actually go as far as I can, sort of follow the lines, so I'm separating the colours. It's not an exact science, to say, have a play and just see what works best for you. So what you can see here, I'm just separating this background with the dies. Again, it's a really nice way to use your other dies that you have in your stash from Lisa. Perhaps look at other nesting sets that you have. There's plenty of other background dies you can use, all sorts. Now you can see here that I've separated this, and you've got slightly different shapes to what I've used before. So when we come to actually mount this onto a card, I've already mounted this ready to go onto the card blank. one thing I would say that this time round you can't, if you want to have the separation between the different sections here, using your matting die won't work this time, because obviously you're spreading the design out, so it's going to sort of cover a larger area. So you will need to organise your sort of matting layer separately, but there's no big issue. And all we do is just replace those pieces onto a contrasting piece of cardstock, and again that just breaks up the pattern, but just gives an interest to the background. It takes away the need for a focal point, which again, using guys, you know, for guys cards can be a little bit tricky, especially if you've got lots of floral dies, because I think all that needs now is just a sentiment on there. Now I can glue this straight down. Again, on this one here, I've used 3D foam just to raise that up and give some interest. Again, that's entirely up to you. And I think all that needs now is just a sentiment to run on there. And I've used, I'll show you what I've used. I've used a stamp from the Scripted Sentiment set, and I've cut myself a banner from the Banner Sentiments die set. Now again, I'm using what I have in my stash. Mix and match the sentiments that you have. Use what works for you. And my third card, the third sample that I would have shown you into the group here, was this one here, using craft card and the scroll die, which has been ever so popular. And all I've done in the background here, I've just taken an ink that was very similar to the craft card that I was using. So I've gone very tonal. Now I did actually run out of craft card to show you this demo. So what I thought I'd do, I'll show you actually on a piece of grey card, just to show you that you can go tonal, and you can still make this into a guy card. So I'm using Lisa's grey ink this time, and I'm going to put the ink, some ink initially on straight onto the die, but not all over, and then I'm going to use the blending brush to actually spread that out, because I don't want sort of the intensity of the grey that I had in the last card there. So we just use your brush and we can just spread this out. Now with the grey, obviously you can't see this sitting on the die, but it is there, and just take your time, sort of blend this onto your die. Now for the tonal effect, I would say then choose a piece of cardstock which is similar in colour to the ink that you're using, and that will give you that really subtle effect. Again, it's another beautiful way to actually create a background, but you can see this on grey card and just how subtle that effect is, and it gives a real embossed type of look without being too raised. Now I think that was just really classic. Now what I've done for this particular card, I've used this technique. I've then used the scroll set. I've used the die to die cut the shape. I've then run it through the scroll embossing folder to give that some dimension, and I've used the same ink that I inked the die with and just highlighted around the outside with a brush to give this effect here. Now that is just so subtle in that background, and that gives us another background to layer anything onto. And I thought this time another card which we all struggle with, perhaps for teenagers, or school children, or anybody perhaps passing exams, we can create like a well done card. Now we've used the pocket builder die. I've used the bold phrases because it had a really lovely well done there. I've used the Bunting and Banners die set for the flags in the background. And because I was using this, I wanted this for a guy's card, I actually removed the little bows. I didn't think there was a need for those. So I've cut those in grey. Now this is perfect for any occasion now, I would say. You can have a little play and add your sentiments. You can have well done on passing your exams. Now this is from another set that we have, the congratulations set, where we have all sorts of different occasions on which we want to offer congratulations, and I've just stamped those onto the top flap of the pocket, which I thought works really well. So we have you rock, or congratulations, or well done on your new job. This works so well if you're giving this to a school, someone at school pupil. You can have a bit of fun and add some colour into this by adding perhaps their school colours in the background, and that gives a pop of colour. But what we are working on is the lovely background, which again just elevates a plain piece of card. I think that just, hopefully that's given you a few ideas. So same techniques, going really subtle, but two different styles of card here. So hopefully that's given you a few ideas on how to use these plates. So if I just bring those other ones back in, I shall have put these together properly and photograph them and put them in the group for you, so you have them as reference. Thanks so much for joining me today, everybody. Take care, and I shall see you soon.